Hey my friends, welcome. So happy to have you here. Today I'm sharing with you 10 of my all-time favorite fall decoupage DIYs. They're easy, budget-friendly, full of cozy charm. From pumpkins to pretty signs, there's going to be something for every style. And don't forget, next Sunday I'll be back with an all-new fall video at 5 p.m. Eastern, so set your reminders and let's get started. We're going to give this pumpkin a much needed makeover. I've taken it outside, given it a couple of coats of the Rust-Oleum Ultra Matte, and once it's dry, I'm going to come back and I'm going to tape it off into 4 sections. And the sections that doesn't have the painter's tape facing inwards, those are the sections we're going to be painting. You'll see what I mean here. And I'm going to give each of the sections, I ended up having to give them 3 coats of the Waverly chalk paint in the color Celery. When I removed the painter's tape, I noticed that my lines weren't very good, weren't very straight. I told y'all before I'm a messy painter. And to help cover that up and disguise that and to give some definition to the segments, I'm going to go in where the green and the white meet, and with this gold bead wrap. This is just from the Dollar Tree. I've cut it into strips, and I went ahead and removed that really sticky backing. I just don't like that, so I just pulled it off and removed it. Using a little bit of hot glue, I'm just going to go in between again where the green and the white segments meet only. I'm going to decoupage each of the white segments. I didn't think I was going to leave those blank, did you? Y'all know me better than that. But anyway, I'm using tissue, and I printed out more of these beautiful fall florals from Canva. And once the ink dried, I came back with this hairspray and give it a good spray. Let that dry, then I popped it in my oven on 200 degrees for about 5 minutes. Please keep an eye on it for safety reasons. Then I'll come in and I'm going to fussy cut each of the flowers out. Now the reason I spray my design with hairspray and then pop it in the oven is because it will seal in that ink and keep it from bleeding whenever you decoupage. If you're using the iron-on method, then you don't have to worry about that. But I'm going to be using Mod Podge on this pumpkin, and obviously I can't use the iron. I use way too much Mod Podge. I'm heavy-handed at times, so just a little bit of Mod Podge goes a long way with this. And I'm just starting to use a sponge, and for whatever reason in my mind, the sponge should be wet. It should not. It needs to be dry. So the combination of the two caused just a little bit of bleeding, not much. It was just very minimal. I can see it, but anywho, not much. But just keep that in mind. Dry sponge, less Mod Podge. But anyways, you can see here on screen, I'm just tapping with this sponge. You don't want to drag it across your design because it will tear it. It's more substantial than tissue, but you can tear it. So just be careful of that. Then once I get everything in place, I'm coming back around the edges with more Mod Podge, just smoothing and sealing everything in. Then I hit it with my blow dryer and dry it really well before I move on to the next segment. Now you could absolutely stop right here, add a stem, and call it finished. It is so pretty the way it is. But we're going to take it one more step and add some florals to the top of the pumpkin. And off camera, I went ahead and hot glued one of these round styrofoam pieces. You can pick these up at the Dollar Tree. I also cut it down just a bit. It was just a little too tall. And I'm going to be using florals that I have on hand. Everything that I'm using I already had on hand except for one thing, and I'll get to that in a moment. And the piece I'm cutting down right now, I believe this was from Hobby Lobby. And I'm just going to insert it right into the center of the styrofoam piece. Just kind of spread it out. It's going to kind of just be my tall centerpiece, and then I'm just going to work the rest of my flowers in around it. And these gorgeous sunflowers that's laying on the table, those came from Walmart. Y'all, I've actually had them 2 or 3 years. I just keep reusing them. I store everything in a tote in my shed, so a little trick I like to use to fluff them back up when they're looking a little sad is my steamer, and you see how pretty and fluffy they are. These beautiful dahlias are actually from the Dollar Tree, believe it or not. They are just so pretty. The greenery that was on it, not so much, so I stripped that off and added some higher quality greenery on there. Actually, they came from the white sunflowers. They just had way too much greenery. That's a little trick I like to use when you have a less expensive flower and the greenery just does not look good. If you'll add some higher quality greenery to it, it just takes it to that next level and makes it look so high end. I've gone ahead and filled in with some greenery and flowers from my toad, and now I'm just popping in these little, I'm not sure what they are, maybe cattails, but the little feathers on them. I only have 2 left over from last year, so I'm just popping them on either side of the arrangement. And then I decided to add these little flowers in. These came from Dollar Tree, and these are the new items that I'm popping in. I actually bought these for another project that's coming up soon, but I'm going to use some of them in this arrangement. I think it was just the perfect touch, and I removed the red berries and the little red leaves. They just didn't look good in my opinion, so I removed those, and I'm going to add in these little white berries, and I think that's just the perfect finishing touch, and I love this so much. It's a little bit wild, a little bit crazy, but that's what I do. I love my arrangements. It's a little bit wild and crazy. Maybe not everybody's cup of tea, but I absolutely love it. I'd like to know what you think about it. We're going to be creating a beautiful rustic pumpkin using the crackle effect with these 3 wooden pieces, and these came from the Dollar Tree. They're about 6.5 inches long. One's a tiny bit taller than the other 2, but that's okay. And guys, these are so rough, so I gave them a very good sand down, wiped them down with the baby wipe to remove all that grit, let it dry before I painted them. And I'm going to be painting 2 of them the color truffle, and then the third, as you see, I painted it with the color plaster from Waverly. Now I'm only going to be doing the crackle effect on the 2 that I painted brown or in the color truffle, and I'm just going to be using plain old school glue, and I like to give a really heavy coat of glue if I want large thick crackles. If you don't want really thick crackles, then you can just put a thinner layer of glue. Now I like to let my glue set up for like 5 or 10 minutes. That's just my preference. You can go straight in whatever you want to do. And I'm also going in with a really thick layer of paint. Sometimes I go thicker, sometimes not so much. As you can see, the piece that I've already done, in some areas it's a little thinner than I had wanted. Now I try not to go back and forth over the glue when I'm adding the paint, because the more you go back and forth over it and mix the glue and the paint together, it will lessen the crackle effect. And after these 2 sides dry, I will flip them over and just repeat this whole process on the other side. While the other 2 blocks are drying, we're going to be decoupaging my all-time favorite, I think, napkin to the other block. And I hope y'all aren't tired of seeing this napkin, but I just truly love it. But anywho, we're going to be using the iron-on method. Short version of that, I'll put a link of video here on the screen and in the description box that gives you more details. You put your Mod Podge down, let it dry, and then you use heat from your iron to reactivate that Mod Podge, and it causes your napkin to adhere to your surface. It's my all-time favorite way to decoupage. It truly is. It gives you a perfect finish 99.9% of the time. Then I just use a finger sander and I just go around the edges and remove that excess napkin. I let these dry for several hours. Overnight is best. But also, as you can see, one of those blocks, the back side did not turn out very well, so we're just going to keep that to the back. And we're using hot glue and Gorilla Wood glue to glue these 2 pieces together. Now, I'm using a popsicle stick because my nozzle is clogged up and wouldn't come out. So I'm just trying to make sure I'm not getting too much wood glue, but I do want to have enough that is going to hold these 2 pieces together. Then I'm just repeating the exact same process with the block that I'm going to glue on top, although I did put a whole lot more wood glue because I really want to make sure that these pieces are going to hold together. And then I let these set overnight just to make sure the glue has time to set up. We're going to add this cute little sign to the front of the pumpkin. I'm just going to use a combination of super glue and hot glue to attach it. It says Happy Fall. It came from Hobby Lobby. You get 4 of them in a packet. It's $1.99 plus 40% off. So sometimes you can get things at Hobby Lobby that is comparable in price or even a little cheaper than the Dollar Tree. We're going to use one of these large wood pieces from the Dollar Tree for this stem. And remember I told you at the beginning that one of these blocks was slightly taller than the other two? Well, somehow I managed to get that one in the front, but I made it work with a little extra hot glue and just kind of pressing it down and centering it up as best I can. And I'm going to add in these leaves also and just pop those around the bottom of the stem. But y'all, this leaf is way too big. I don't know what I was thinking. I do go back and trim one of them down. I don't know why I didn't go back and trim this one down, but I didn't. I just used my blow dryer, popped it off, and then just trimmed it down and then used a little more hot glue and reattached it. I'm also going to go in with some Spanish moss and put it around the base of the stem just to further camouflage that one block is a little bit taller than the other two. I'm sure you've noticed the changing flowers here on the table. I just could not make up my mind what I wanted to use. I ended up going with the little white wildflower that's laying there on the table. Those came from Walmart. I found those this year. I thought they were just so pretty and delicate. And those little orange and yellow, I don't know what those are, and I don't know where they came from. I've had them so long, but I just cut off a few little stems. I'm just going to pop those in on the other side at different heights, and then I'll add in a little pine cone just to finish it off, and I think it is so adorable. I just love it. For this project, we're going to be using these 3 pumpkins from the Dollar Tree, and we're going to start by removing all this paper, labels, and everything from these pumpkins. I use my iron like most people would use a heat gun because I don't have one, and it just makes those pesky labels and stickers just peel right off. And then I'm going to use a combination of my scraper and then spray water onto the top of each of the pumpkins, cover them with some wet paper towels for just a bit, and this stuff you can just scrape it right off. After all the paper is removed, I just gave them a really good sand down, wiped them down again really well, and then just put them aside and let them completely dry overnight. Once everything is dried, we're going to go in and give each of the pumpkins a coat of Waverly chalk paint in the color plaster. I've already added a layer of Mod Podge to each of the pumpkins and let that dry. And y'all, isn't this napkin beautiful? It came from Amazon, and I'll try my best to remember to link it down below. I'm terrible with that, so sorry if I forget. Just ask me in the comments and I'll remember to go back. And I'm going to line it up across the top of the pumpkin. And y'all, I don't know why I didn't cover the stem. In my mind, I had planned on doing it, but I go back and fix that in just a moment. But anyway, I'm lining it up across there, the top of the pumpkin, making sure I have all the wrinkles smoothed out before I place the parchment sheet on top. And we're going to be using the iron-on method, and this is one of my favorite methods to decoupage with. If you watch my videos, you know that you just have an iron on very low setting, and then I like to start in the center of my project and just work my way out and then all the way around the surface. And what it does, the heat reactivates that Mod Podge and it causes the napkin to attach to your surface. To cover the rest of the stem, I'm just using the bottom part of the napkin that I sanded off of the pumpkin and lining it up as best I can right there, trying to make it match up as much as possible, and then just very gently go over it with the iron, just kind of tapping it to hold it in place. And see how perfect it looks? At least I think so. And then I just use my finger sander just to remove that excess napkin. I've added a little bit of twine to the stem. I didn't go all the way to the top. For whatever reason this year, I'm just loving leaving the top part of the stem uncovered. And then I'm just going to go in and add a couple of little bows. And the ribbon, of course, came from the Dollar Tree. And so did the little flower that's laying there on the table. Guys, this is always just ideas. You do not have to use these colors, this napkin, whatever. You can paint your pumpkin, whatever you might prefer. But I did pull that flower apart because it's still kind of big for this little pumpkin, but I think it is just so cute. I'm loving this shabby chic kind of vibe going on. But tell me what you guys think. I really think this turned out so super sweet. For the next pumpkin, we're going to be using this decoupage paper, and this came from Amazon. And isn't it gorgeous? I'm just trying to line it up on the pumpkin where I can get as much of this beautiful paper as I can and just the different areas of it. And y'all, this is going to be a very simple pumpkin because I love this paper so much. I didn't think it needed any embellishment. Of course, you can always embellish it however you want, but I just wanted to showcase this beautiful paper. And of course, we're using the iron-on method because with this gorgeous paper, you want it to be as smooth and wrinkle-free as possible. And then I'm just going to go in with my finger sander and just remove all the excess paper. I think this turned out just absolutely beautiful. Again, you can add whatever embellishments you may choose, but I think this paper is just enough embellishment on its own. You can even distress it a little bit if you want, but again, I just chose to leave it as it is. For this last pumpkin, we're going to be using some more of the decoupage paper from Amazon, and I just love this design, and I did go ahead and just adhere it using the iron-on method. So for the final pumpkin, I wanted to do a little something different, so we're going to add this Hello Autumn sign, and this came from the Dollar Tree. You know, they come in those little packets of 5 or 6, and I'm just using a baby wipe to apply the antiquing wax from Waverly. I want the sign to have a 3D effect on the front of the pumpkin, so I'm just using one of these little tiny clear beads from the Dollar Tree, of course, and I'm going to attach it to the back of the sign, and then I've already found the center, hopefully the center of my pumpkin, and I'm adding just a teensy bit of hot glue, and then just pop that into place and just kind of hold it until it sets up. I chose to keep this pumpkin very simple and just very elegant. You can, of course, dress it up however you want. You can distress it, add a ribbon, whatever might be the case. But I think this turned out so beautiful and just as simplicity. You would never guess these were those ugly pumpkins that I picked up at the Dollar Tree. Maybe I know which one's my favorite, but let me hear which one is your favorite of the 3 that I've decorated, and I just love them. Again, you can add bows, flowers, whatever might be the case, distress them a little bit, but I just love how these have turned out. For this project, we're going to be using these wooden firecrackers from Michael's, and I got these last year when they had everything about 75% off. And then we're also going to be using this beautiful napkin, and that's so pretty, and that was gifted to me by Brandy. And we're going to be using the color plaster from Waverly Chalk Paint. I'm just going to go ahead and give each of the wooden pieces one coat of the Waverly Chalk Paint. When I finished painting, I realized that the wood grain was just not showing through the way that I had hoped it would. So I'm going to go back in and just using some of the Waverly antiquing wax from Folk Art, and I'm just kind of drawing along the lines where the wood grain would have shown through, and I'm just, as you can see, just drawing the lines in. I got a little heavy-handed in some spots, but that's okay. I just went in with another brush with a little bit of plaster and thinned it down with some water, and I'm just kind of brushing over it just to fade it out a little bit. I'm going to use 3 different squares for this project, and I'm just going to cut each of the squares out and do as finely detailed work as I can. It's time consuming, yes, but it is so worth it. And as you can see, I'm just putting down an even pretty thin layer of Mod Podge, and I'm going to use a different section of the napkin for each of the wood pieces. I'm just lining it up where I want it as best I can, and I'm going to use the cling wrap to help smooth it out so my fingers just not stick to the napkin, because this napkin is very, very thin. It's beautiful, but it's very thin. So this one I had to patch up just a bit. As you see the pumpkin laying there on the table, I kind of chopped it off. My granddaughter and I were FaceTiming, and we were crafting while we were FaceTiming, and I was cutting out my napkins, and I wasn't paying attention and chopped off that part, and I was like, why did you do that? But I just trimmed it up, and as you can see, I'm lining it up, and I think I made it work pretty well. You'll have to tell me. And I just patted it with the cling wrap until I got it to lay down and just blend in with the other, and then I just covered it with a layer of Mod Podge. Once all 3 wood pieces were completely dry, I went back with my nail file and just very gently sanded off the edges, because these napkins are very, very delicate. And again, this is where I just went in and give it a really good coat of Mod Podge and just seal the napkins down really well. Now I'm just using some stems from a bag that I got from Walmart for my pumpkins, but you can go outside and find sticks in your yard for free and make a stem for your pumpkin. I know I say all the time that I love my DIYs, and I do. They're like my little children sometimes. But these, I fell in love with these. I really don't think that they look like napkins on the front. So tell me what you think. For this project, we're going to be using this beautiful napkin, an acorn sign from the Dollar Tree, and some pine cones. And I'm going to go ahead and give the acorn sign a coat of Waverly's chalk paint in the color plaster. Let that dry, then I'm going to go in and add a layer of Mod Podge and let that dry as well, because we're going to be using the iron-on method to attach our napkin. A little trick that I like to do before I attach my napkin, I like to go over it with an iron and just smooth out any wrinkles or anything, and it helps so much to just flatten out your napkin when you attach it. And you want to make sure you've removed all the plies. I've already removed both of the plies, and as you saw, I used a little piece of tape to keep that napkin in place and give me a sharp, crisp edge right across the top of the acorn. Then I'm just going to hit it with my finger sander and just remove all of that excess napkin. I love using the iron-on method because it gives you such a perfect, smooth finish almost every single time. For the next part of our DIY, I'm going to be using pine cones from my yard. If you buy them, you won't have to do this part, but I'm popping them in the oven on 200 degrees for about 90 minutes. I check them every 20 to 30 minutes. Please make sure you do that, because it's to kill any mold or little pests that might be in them. And yes, I had 2 that was in the bottom of my pan. Once they cooled, I'm going in with these little cheap clippers from the Dollar Tree. And y'all, this worked so well. You see the things lined up across there. I wanted you to see I tried each and every one of them, and it just smushed the little scales that I'm clipping off. But anyway, these worked like a charm. So if you find them, stock up on them. And then once that's done, I have a whole pile here and then another pile off camera you can't see. And I'm going to apply them one by one with some hot glue. And yes, this took a while, but it is so worth it. I cannot wait for you to see the finished product at the end. Before I get to the stem, I'm going to stop and add some twine. I decided not to go all the way up the acorn stem with the little segments, and I'm just using a little bit of hot glue, making sure I'm using my little finger protectors not to burn my fingers, and then I'm just going to wrap the twine all the way up the stem. As I'm doing this, I'm looking at my side and I'm like, why did I not paint the top of the acorn brown? It would have made it blend in a whole lot better, but I do fix that in just a moment. But first, I'm snipping off the tops of the little segments and I'm going back and hot gluing them on top of those jagged edges just to give it a better finished look and to make it look more like an authentic acorn. And here I am going back in with just a teeny tiny brush and some nutmeg from Apple Barrel. I'm just going around the outside and any little peaks of white that might be showing through. Then I'm just creating a little hanger with some twine and just hot gluing it, and I'll pop a piece of ribbon over the back just to make sure it stays in place. I made a very simple bow out of some raffia and just hot glued it to the stem of the acorn. My battery died, so I lost that footage, so sorry about that. But I wanted the segments and the pine cone at the top of the acorn to be the star of this piece, and I think it's just very rustic, kind of primitive. It's very different than what I normally do. It was a little bit time consuming to make, but it was so very easy, and I love this piece. I really do. I'd like to know what your thoughts are about it. For the first part of this project, we're going to be using this wooden pumpkin from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to go ahead and give it a quick coat of Waverly chalk paint in the color Plaster. Now after my paint has dried, I'm going to go in and put down a layer of Mod Podge and let that dry before we add our napkin. This month we're crafting our stash, and I'm going to be using this beautiful leopard print napkin that came from Hobby Lobby. Now most of your napkins are going to be 2 and 3 ply, so you do want to make sure you remove those before you Mod Podge or a decoupage your napkin to your surface. And I am taping it because I want to keep it in place because I want a very clean, crisp line across the stem of my pumpkin. If you haven't guessed by now, we're using the iron-on method to attach the napkin, and this is my absolute favorite way to decoupage. And you're just running your iron on low temperature over the surface of your napkin, and I've placed a sheet of wax paper, I believe it is, just for protecting my napkin, and the heat reactivates that Mod Podge, and see what a beautiful, pretty much wrinkle-free surface you have. And I just used my little finger sander to remove the excess napkin. For the next part of our project, we're going to be using these 2 little pumpkins. They were part of a garland, and I've gone ahead and filled in the holes at the top with some spackling. Let that dry, and then we're going to give them a coat of the Waverly chalk paint in white. For the shorter pumpkin, we're going to attach this piece of scrapbook paper that came from Hobby Lobby, and I've had this forever in my stash, and I think it is so beautiful. It just reminds me of kind of a shabby chic look, and I thought it would just go perfect with this project. Now I'm trying to remove as much of this excess paper as possible because I didn't really want to have to do a lot of sanding because of the texture of this scrapbook paper. I was afraid it might start either tear or start to fray on me, and it did fray just a little bit, but with trimming it off with some little tiny scissors and with some Mod Podge, I just went around and it did stop the fraying. We're going to add this little blessed word to the front of the pumpkin, and this came from Dollar Tree. You can get them in a pack of, I think it's like 6, usually during the fall season, and I've just given it a coat of Waverly chalk paint and truffle. And for our third pumpkin, we're going to paint it. And as you can see, I have a variety of paints there on my plate. I've just kind of mixed together pumpkin from Waverly chalk paint, burnt umber, and bright red from apple barrel. And then I mixed in with that a little bit of Waverly chalk paint and just kind of mixed it all together until I got the color that I was looking for. We're going to use this long sign. Gosh, what is this thing? Anyway, you get them from Dollar Tree. They have them for every season. And we're going to give it 2 coats of ink from Waverly chalk paint. And we're going to be using this as our stand for the 3 pumpkins. After it had dried, I went back in with a chipping brush and just using some of the leftover paint from the pumpkin and just kind of dry brushed back and forth just to lighten it up a little bit and give it more of a little bit of a rustic, distressed look. We're going to use these little wooden blocks from the Dollar Tree, and I'm just going to hot glue them to the back of each of the pumpkins just to give it more support and to help it stand up on this base. Y'all, I just realized I did not show you the part of wrapping the twine around the pumpkin stem. Sorry about that. I'm using hot glue to attach my pumpkins, but you may want to use something that has a little bit more of a permanent hold, like E6000 or Gorilla Gel Glue. That's my favorite. It doesn't smell so bad, but because I'm trying to rush and get this video done, I'm using hot glue because it sets up so much faster. I'm adding in just a little bit of extra hot glue beside each of the tumbling blocks just for some extra security. We're just going to make a simple little bow. We've just folded the ribbon over like you're making an awareness ribbon, and then I'm going to do the same for the one with the pumpkins on it. And I believe both of these came from the Dollar Tree. Not quite sure about the little pumpkin ribbon, but I think it is just absolutely adorable. And I'm just making sure I get my loops somewhat even because I'm terrible about not getting my loops even. And then I'm just going to tie it off in the center with the pipe cleaner. I've gone ahead and made a couple of other little shoestring bows for the other 2 pumpkins. And isn't this little leopard print ribbon adorable? That came from Amazon. I've had that for quite a while. And then I made a little bow out of some more twine. And then I'm just adding them all with some hot glue. And then I'm just going to pop in this little flower in the center to cover up that pipe cleaner. Now you could stop right here if you wanted to, and I almost did, but I got to looking at it. I'm like, the base of this just looks so plain, so I decided to add in just a little bit of Spanish moss, and I'm just putting down a layer of hot glue and adding in the Spanish moss, and then that led to it needed another little pumpkin or some little flowers or something, so I just continued on. Like I said, you could have just stopped after you added the 3 pumpkins and the bows, but I wanted to just add just a little bit more. More is always more when you're crafting, right? I'm just going to pop in a few little embellishments and make it look all pretty on top of the moss. And this foam pumpkin was left over from a project last year, and I just removed that plastic stem, broke off a stick from outside and popped that in there, a little tiny leaf and a little more of the moss, and then we're just going to hot glue that on front and add in some of these pine cones and acorns and some of those really cute little yellow wildflowers, and I think it is just absolutely perfect. I love it. Y'all, I am really getting ready to decorate for fall. Is anybody else getting ready to decorate for fall? I think this is going to be such a great piece to add to my fall decor this year. And y'all excuse my tabletop. It's a rescue piece and I have not had the time to refinish it. I've been meaning to do it for a very long time. For this project, we're going to be using Waverly chalk paint in ink and white, and I forgot to show you the white, for the pumpkins from the Dollar Tree and scrapbook paper from Hobby Lobby. I've gone ahead and given each of the pumpkins a good sanding down on the front and back, especially the front with all that glitter. And I'm going to give 2 of the pumpkins a coat of the Waverly White chalk paint. And I was running low, so I thinned it out a little too much with water, so I had to go back and give the 2 pumpkins that I'm painting white, I had to give them 2 coats each. Now the 2 white pumpkins I am going to be adding the scrapbook paper to, so you do not have to paint them if you don't want to, but anytime I'm decoupaging anything, napkin, scrapbook paper, tissue, whatever, it's just my preference to paint them white. I just love this paper. I think it is so pretty, and I want to make sure that I get these black and white check pumpkins in the center of the wooden pumpkins. So I'm just going to kind of play around with it and get my placement just right. Then I'm going to go in with a pencil and just trace around exactly where I want to make my cut. I'm going to use Mod Podge to attach the scrapbook paper. You can use whatever you prefer, glue stick, spray adhesive, but whenever I'm using scrapbook paper, I prefer Mod Podge because I can put a very generous layer down because the scrapbook paper is very thick. And I want to make sure that this paper is going to adhere to my surface. And I'm just lining it up as best I can. Then I'm just going to smooth it out, making sure I get any air bubbles or excess Mod Podge that might be up under that paper that will leave it kind of lumpy and bumpy. We're going to be spelling out the word fall and putting that on the front of each of the little pumpkins. And I didn't have any orange letters, so I decided to just paint these large letters that you can pick up from the Dollar Tree. And I mixed together Waverly's chalk paint pumpkin and white and mixed that together. And I just was not fond of this color. I had found a pumpkin at Walmart and it was a peachy pink, so I just mixed together some apple barrel blush pink and added that to it, and I love it. I love this color. I think it is so pretty. Judge tell me what you think of the color. After the letters had dried, and I just very carefully pull them up so as not to tear them, and then I'm just figuring out my placement, trying to center them up as best I can, and then I'm just going to attach them with some Mod Podge. I did go back over the top of each of the pumpkins and just completely cover it with Mod Podge, especially the black ones, because I wanted to make sure it didn't look kind of weird with just a little bit of Mod Podge on top of the letters, and I also wanted to make sure everything was sealed in. Now I'm showing you 2 ribbons here, but I only used one, the lace ribbon from the Dollar Tree, and I just made a quick and simple little bow, tied it in the center with some jute twine, and just attached it with some hot glue to the front of each of the pumpkins. As you can see, I wrapped the stem of each of the pumpkins with jute twine. In the move, I did lose some of the footage for this video, so sorry about that. But again, just use some jute twine from the Dollar Tree, a little bit of hot glue, and just wrapped it around the stem. I just love these colors, the black and white neutral farmhouse colors, and I love how the fall letters turned out, and the pumpkin back there is my inspiration for that color. So y'all gotta tell me what you think. Did I get close to it? For this DIY, we're going to be using one of these metal trays from the Dollar Tree, and I've wiped it down really well with alcohol. Once it's dried, I took it outside and gave it 2 coats of the Rust-Oleum's Flat Black. Once it was dry, I mixed together some Waverly's white chalk paint and a lot of water, and I'm using an old paintbrush and just going around the outer edge. I want those little details around the outside of the tray to really pop out, so I'm just lightly brushing over it. If I get too heavy-handed in some areas, I do use a baby wipe and just wipe it back a little bit. We're going to add this orange napkin to the bottom of the tray, and y'all, I wasted one of the napkins they were gifted to me. Trying to get this backing off, it would not come off. Absolutely would not. So I just rolled with it. I've never done this before. Used a napkin without taking the back off. I wouldn't advise it, but it worked for some reason with this napkin. I did put a very heavy layer of Mod Podge, and you can see the napkin is holding up very well to my pushing and pulling and tugging to get that line out of the center. But I just used this plastic wrap and just smoothed any air bubbles and just smoothed this napkin out and had no issues with it. This pumpkin was part of a garland, and I just filled in the 2 holes at the top with some spackling and let that dry, and then I just gave the whole thing a good sanding down and then just wiped back any grit or anything like that. And then I'm going in with Waverly's plaster, and I'm going to give it 1 coat, and then before it's completely dry, I'm going to go back in with some burnt umber from Apple Barrel and just brush around the outer edges and just kind of create those pumpkin lines just to give it a little bit more definition. After letting the pumpkin set overnight and make sure it was completely dry, I'm going to come back and add this rub-on transfer from the Dollar Tree, and it says Simply Blessed, and I love this. It's so sweet. I cannot find any more rub-on transfers like this at my local Dollar Trees. This was picked up a couple of years ago or more now, and I'm just placing it as best I can in the center of the pumpkin, and I'm going to use this little tool. It came with some other rub-on transfers that I bought on Amazon, and I love this tool. It works so well. But anyway, I'm just rubbing over the letters. For whatever reason, this transfer did not want to go on, so it took quite a bit of rubbing back and forth to get it to adhere. And whenever I thought I had everything down, I went to lift it up and realized the bottom of my S's had not come off, so I lined it back up as best I could, and I used my fingernails, as you can see right here, for this part, and it did end up coming off really well. Then I'm just going to come back in with a layer of Mod Podge just to seal that transfer in. I'm using hot glue to attach the pumpkin, but you can use your glue of choice, and I thought the bottom of the pumpkin needed just a little something, so I'm just popping in a little bit of this Spanish moss, and I made a messy bow off camera, and we're just going to add that to the top of the tray. And then I got to looking at it, and y'all know me, it just was looking like it was missing something, so I took some raffia and just tied it in a knot, trimmed it up, and then popped that right into the center of the bow. And I thought that was just the perfect little extra touch that it needed, and I think this is just so sweet. This is actually more of a hack than a DIY, but oh, I so love it. I'm using these 2 recycled candles, just plain old white tissue paper from the Dollar Tree, and a sheet of printing paper. I've ironed out the wrinkles out of the tissue paper, wrapped it around the printing paper, and just taped it down. That is the key. I have taped the heck out of this thing, smoothed everything down really well. Keeps it from jamming up your printer. I went to Canva, put in floral fall arrangements, and came up with this beautiful picture. Now y'all, you can Google and find anything and print it out, or you can even use a napkin, whatever your choice is. For this project, I wanted to use tissue paper, so we're going with that. Now I'm going to be doing what's called fussy cutting using scissors. Y'all know if you watch my videos, I prefer the water method, where you use a tiny paintbrush and water, and just it gives it that uneven, organic look. Now, I prefer that, but using scissors works better with tissue, at least, like I said, for me it does. So it takes a little extra minute, yep, but it's so worth it. And tissue paper is just so very forgiving when you decoupage with it, especially in putting it on a white surface, which y'all know I like to do. And obviously these candles are white, and this picture just melds into the candle. I can't wait for y'all to see the end. To me, it's just so beautiful. A little tip or trick that I've learned when fussy cutting: if you leave your backing on a napkin or put a piece of paper behind your tissue, it makes it more sturdy and easy to maneuver when you're doing the fine detailed cutting. It just makes your life a whole lot easier. Now this video is about upcycling and reusing things that you have on hand, which is why I'm using these candles, and they're pure white, and I wanted that background for this project. but you can always use battery operated candles. You can get those at the Dollar Tree, Walmart, somewhere like that. Not all battery operated candles will work well with the heat method, so you may have to use Mod Podge to attach your napkin or tissue. I'm not going to use Mod Podge to attach this. I'm just going to use my blow dryer and just soften up and just kind of melt the wax just a tiny bit. And I'm going to find my placement. You know, I have to fiddle with it for forever. And then once I've found my placement, I've cut down a sheet of parchment paper and I'm just going to wrap it all the way around. And then I'm going to use my blow dryer on high heat. And well, I kind of rotate back and forth between high and low heat because this gets hot. This little blow dryer really heats up. And I do get a pot holder in just a moment, you'll see, and hold on to the end of it. Don't burn your fingers. And I'm just moving the nozzle back and forth and just trying to evenly melt, not really melt, but you know, soften up that wax so that my tissue will start to just meld into the candle. Y'all, I can't wait for you to see the end result. I'm just rubbing my hand over the parchment just to make sure everything is going to adhere and there's no ends that are not attached to the candle. And because the candle is kind of soft, you will want to set it aside and just let it reharden. And y'all, it is so beautiful. I absolutely love it. Today we're going to be creating a beautiful riser using this wooden palette from Walmart, and we're going to start by giving it 2 coats of the Rust-Oleum chalk paint. Once the paint is dry, I'm going to go ahead and attach the stencil using painter's tape, and I'm only going to be using one word on this stencil, and that's the word welcome. I don't think you can see it very well. And then I'll be using the color Truffle from Waverly Chalk Paint. And I'm just going to be using this little round sponge from the Dollar Tree to apply the paint. And as you can see, I picked up way too much paint, so I dabbed some of that off before I go in. Because if you have too much paint on your sponge, it could cause some bleeding with your stencil, and I want to prevent that as much as possible. Isn't this napkin beautiful? I just love it. And I've already removed both of the additional plies, and then I'm just going to be using my favorite method to detach the white and just separate the napkin. And that's just a tiny paintbrush with some water. I love the uneven edges that it gives. To me, it just makes it blend in with your project so much better. Gone ahead and added a layer of Mod Podge to each of the slats and let that dry before we move on to the next step. And we're going to be using the iron-on method to attach our napkin, and that is just simply letting your Mod Podge dry, and then as you can see, I've placed a sheet of parchment over my napkin, and I'm just very gently running the iron over it, and it's on very low setting, and it will reactivate that Mod Podge and cause the napkin to adhere to your surface. Going to continue with this process all the way around the palette until my eyes are happy with the amount of sunflowers that I have. Because of the way I've positioned the sunflowers where it's covering the gap between the two slats, I decided to go ahead and just use my finger sander and remove that excess napkin because I was afraid it might catch on something and then cause the napkin to tear, especially right there where that gap is. And I do go back later and just use my X-Acto knife in a nail file just to smooth all of that out. I decided while I was sanding, I might as well go ahead and just sand off all the excess napkin that I have placed on here so far. And as you see, I have an extra piece of parchment paper right there. And I did that on purpose because there's a tiny bit of the sunflower, the large one at the very bottom, that was hanging over onto that third slat. And I wanted to make sure when I was ironing that I didn't accidentally attach it to the two flowers there. So the parchment paper was just slid right up under those edges to keep it from attaching to that slat. And then I'm just going in with this nail file and just very, very gently removing that extra napkin. And this is very sped up. Like I said, this is just very gently because you do not want to tear your napkin. For our feet, we're going to be using these large beads, and they came from Amazon, and I've gone ahead and given them 2 coats of Rust-Oleum chalk paint and linen white. I've gone ahead and placed little marks on the palette just to make sure I'm going to get the legs or feet, whatever you want to call them, exactly where I want them, and I'm just going to use some Gorilla Hot Glue to attach the beads. Y'all, this was just so very fast and easy to do, really. I'm pokey in doing crafts because I like to take my time, but this was just so very fast to put together. You could use any napkins, any colors that you want. I chose this because next year I can use it throughout summer if I choose. I did take it outside and give it a good spray with Mod Podge and let it set. Then I sprayed it again just to seal everything in. I could not be more pleased with how this turned out, and I hope that you guys love this as much as I do. Thanks so much for stopping by. I hope you found some cozy fall inspirations in today's video, and if you enjoyed it, don't forget to give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already. And I hope to see you back here next Sunday at 5 p.m. Eastern for an all-new fall video. I hope you have a blessed week, and I will see you soon.